Good evening. My name is Simon Nightingale. I'm chair of Shropshire Humanists. Welcome to this Shropshire Humanist event. It's good to see old friends and some new faces. Some of you have the good fortune to live in Shropshire. Some of you have the grave misfortune of not living in Shropshire. Our guest speaker tonight, Amanda Jones, is a good friend. She is from Shropshire. But as you'll learn, her particular passion, her compassion, is for those whose lives have been shattered by war, oppression, bereavement, even torture, and the loss of all they hold dear. For she is the founder and director of Shropshire Supports Refugees. Amanda was due to give us this talk in April this year, in person, but it had to be cancelled because of the first breakdown. And of course, since then, she's been incredibly busy because COVID has made the plight of refugees and asylum seekers so much worse. And we're indeed fortunate that she's found time to come here tonight, for she's also the Age UK Sounding Board Committee. She's a trustee for Shropshire Cycle Hub, and she's on the board of the Marches Anti-Slavery Partnership, and she's now to join West Mercia Police Independent Advisory Group. And she has a young family. So thank you, Amanda. Far away.
So I've called it Shropshire Supports Refugees Past, Present and Future because that's what it is really. It's a little, hopefully a whistle-stop tour about how we became Shropshire Supports Refugees. And I do that because I think it's important for everyone to know that anybody can do this. Anyone with enough passion and time can start their own cause, start their own organisation, and bring people along with them that feel the same as them. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. And so here we go. And one would like to think, there you go. So when I was, back in 2015, I was at home with my son, who was 2, and I was having obviously a career break, but I was obviously being exposed to a lot of news stories, and they were all about the war in Syria. And, you know, it's awful to say, but I think you become a little bit numbed to visuals on television about, you know, war and things in other countries, and you just go, do you know what? I can't do anything for where I am here. I have no control over anything. So you become a bit numb to it. But there was these images of people walking to us from, you know, the Middle East, in Europe. And it really opened up my heart to think that, you know, maybe there is something I can do from England. And these are the sort of images that moved me. People walking on motorways, children living in squalor. I decided to do as much research as I could, and I discovered that there was nearly 10,000 people living in Calais, and it was just shocking to see pictures of children living like this just across the sea from us. You know, you'd like to think if they were in our land that this wouldn't happen, but just across the sea in France, apparently this was perfectly acceptable, and it still goes on today. It's just that the numbers are not as many, but the more I looked into it, the more horrified I was at how they were being treated by not just our country, but the police that were there in France, regularly tear gassing the children and the families. They didn't care who got it. They were just trying to disperse people constantly. The more I read about it, the more I found out about the gang violence and the horrific crimes that go on in these camps. And the tension as it was building was causing disputes within the camp. There was violence. So I decided to do something. And I heard a woman on the radio called Kate Badano in Shropshire talking about how she'd raised money to buy a caravan to take to Calais. So I thought, well, if she can do it, then I'm sure I can do it. And at the time I knew a lot of musicians, and we all got together, and I think there was about 3 or 4 bands, I can't remember exactly now. There was a magician, there was a raffle, there was an auction, and we raised £3,500. And with some of that, I bought this caravan, and that was the team of people that helped me cleaning out. It was disgusting. But what also happened was through my research and contacting people, I found out that there was a big network across the country, and in fact now across the world, of grassroots organizations that just want to help. And so it was my first experience really of this. And I got contacted by the Hearts Bells, who are a WI group in St Albans, and they wanted to do the caravan up. And if I had more time, I'd show you pictures of the inside of it. It was just absolutely beautiful by the end of it. And this was me and my friend and my son and his girlfriend at the time dropping it off with them to do their magic. And that's the caravan at the end going into Calais, into the camp. And I'd filled it up with loads of stuff as well for everyone else. And here is the caravan being put into the camp in Calais. So what actually happened was I went down before the caravan arrived with my friend, my son and his girlfriend at the time. And we took the rest of the money with us and we spent it on whatever people needed. And we hooked up with a woman called Alice, who was in the camp, and she had a big sort of a yurt really, with a constant pot of ginger and honey and lemon in the background for people to keep them well. And it was where all the teenagers and the children and the unaccompanied teenagers and children would go to. So we went there and we spent all the money on whatever they needed really. It was a real eye-opening experience, and people would just turn up with vans full of vegetables and fruit, and then the queues would start, and then it would be dispersed within a matter of minutes. It was just survival at its best. So as an example of the goodwill around the town, Millets gave us £2,000 worth of camping equipment for £700, which was wonderful of them. So we took that down. And there's Anita in the supermarket in France, just spending that cash on basics: oil, eggs, milk, firewood, water. You know, it was a bottomless pit. You got 10,000 people there just living off donations. And to this day, it's majoritively British organisations and British people that actually keep the people alive down there. They go over there relentlessly with money and food, and they do volunteer work. There's an organisation called L'Auberge de Migrants. They are very active down in Calais, but otherwise it seemed to be quite predominantly British people helping down there. We still do collections for Calais, and we still connect up with all of the active networks on the ground. So I'm part of a group in Facebook. There's about 300 and something organisations across the country, I think, that are part of it. And we all work together as a team to address issues in Greece or France or wherever it is. So it's a wonderful system. So when I got back, it took me a good couple of months to actually get over what I'd seen. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I'd never seen anything like it before. I didn't know what else I could do from where I was. Oh, hang on, I've just pressed something that I shouldn't. I was just, oh, and it's now narrating. Sorry, Simon. Okay, I think I've stopped that. So I was really unsure what else I could do really from Shrewsbury, because we've got the sea between us and most of the asylum seekers. But I was very, very lucky to get a phone call from Shropshire Council, who asked me if I would support Refugee Action in their formal resettlement of Year 1 refugees that were being brought over on the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme. And so they wanted welcome groups around the county to collect clothes, household goods and toys and things like that. So I just relished that opportunity and rallied together a bunch of friends, and through my networking had a whole bunch of new friends now who were good at doing all this stuff, and they're still involved to this day. And we just collected, and it was all in my house under the stairs, which didn't go down too well with my husband, bless him. Very tolerant for the first couple of years. For the first 18 months, we did that voluntary. We did it repeatedly. So over the last 4 years, we've probably done that about 6 times, I think I counted. So it's 6 cohorts of people at a time, between 3 and 5 people at a time. Sorry, not people, families. And I wasn't involved with the Oswestry family's arrival because there was a woman up there that was doing that separately. And so I covered the other 15 families, if you like. No, 18 families, sorry. So we've done this a number of times now, and there's people on this group that have probably recognised this, and we've had many other displays as well since then. Sorry, just there you go. We also decided it would be nice to do welcome hampers, and we had most of this donated by local companies just to show them how welcome they were, what we did in this county, and you know, I think they looked at it dubiously and probably didn't know what to do with half of it, but they got the message that they were welcome. And we did this, and we will continue to do this for whatever groups arrive in the county. We ended up realizing that they needed money for TVs and kitchen appliances, and appliances that would help them to make their own food, like pressure cookers, meat grinders. And so we then started raising money every time a new cohort of families arrived. And we did that in lots of different ways. In those days, I had the time to organize events. So I did like clothing sales. I did this Get Your Kit On, that raised quite a lot of money once. We basically collected dresses, and I washed them all and dried them all in my living room. And then we hung them up and sold them, and there was like beauty treatments. And over the years, we've done lots of different ways of fundraising. But these days, because I'm so busy running the organisation, which has just grown from strength to strength, I don't have time to do that. But I'm always trying to encourage other people to do these sorts of things. So if you ever feel the need to get active, then let me know. And at the moment, we try to just rely on donations every time a new family comes. And it has worked so far. So we started to host parties, and this was the first party that we did. It was a Christmas party, and about 200 people came. It was really lovely. We put on a feast, a banquet, and some of the refugees brought food as well. They love food, that's their thing, and they love gatherings and they love celebrations. And it was a really special night, and they were dancing and we were getting to know them, and it was a lovely, all the kids had presents. I'd love to do something like this again. We haven't been able to do that in the last couple of years, but it's always on the cards. We had magicians and balloon people. I've blurred faces wherever I can. Ooh, apart from that one. So obviously, as time went on, stuff became an issue, and thankfully Storage King saved me and gave us free storage for the last 4 years practically. So I can't thank them enough. We do have a little crisis this week. They need us to downsize, and I've got stuff in that lockup that needs to be pulled out and sent down to Calais, like tents and sleeping bags and clothes and things. And I'm actually supposed to be isolating until the 27th, and they want it done at the 23rd. So I have put a shout out on Facebook, on my closed Facebook group, for anyone who feels like they could help us out, maybe on Saturday. If I give some instructions, let me know if you can help. So they've saved us. And as time went on, we started to get requests from the families to have volunteers that would help them to learn English and orientate them around the town. And we realized that a lot of them were very stressed. So we decided to start some groups up, and one of them here was a stress management group that we ran at the Wildlife Trust sessions that we started. I was very lucky that Shropshire Council valued in what I was doing enough to start giving me a grant back in 2017, I think. So the grant came and I turned it into a company. But we did a 12-week Wildlife Trust project, because it was based there, where all the families and all the children would come on a Saturday. And the mums would have their stress management classes upstairs. The men would have English practice downstairs. And the children were all led by artists and creatives who, and we know the therapeutic value of doing art. So they got to have loads of fun. And I just immersed myself in the world of refugee resettlement and looked at what all the other areas of the country were doing, all the different local authorities and grassroots organisations. And psychosocial support shined out as the way forward. So that basically means bringing people together under the same roof to support each other, giving them usually an activity to do. So, I don't know, cooking something together or making something together or leading an art project or doing yoga. So that's how I've really modelled all the things that we do from then on, really. And we started a women's group, and we started, well, it changed venues. It started off being in Palmer's, it ended up in the Quaker meeting rooms, but it was lovely by the end of it. The women really felt comfortable there. They didn't even need me there to even open up. They would have coffee, they'd bring their Syrian coffee and their hubbly bubblies, I don't know what they're called, or shishas, you know, you smoke them. And the kids would play, and we would have somebody sometimes running a session for them in arts and crafts, or we'd do stress management, and they would dance, and that's just so therapeutic in itself, isn't it? So we miss those days, but hopefully we'll be able to start that up again next year. And we used to get volunteers to come along and help keep an eye on the kids and just to socialise with the ladies, really. And the whole point of psychosocial support is that, you know, you do games, chat, laughter, whatever it is, really. This is Consuelo, one of our volunteers. She brought her guitar one day and we were all singing music and chatting around the table. So this is a little bit about the fact that we realised that they were going to need more than just dropping off and hoping that they get on with things. And so I created the CIC and I learned how to run a company, which was a bit of a learning curve, but there you go, I'm always up for a challenge. So we now continue to run as a CIC, but we are moving to a charity soon because things have changed and it's grown, and we're at a point where we're ready to be a charity, and also we need the funding streams that charities can access. So I've got someone called Robert onto that, bless him. We've been very lucky to be funded for all these years by Shropshire Council, and we have had little pots of funding from the lottery fund. So we're very grateful to them as well. So they gave me a business startup fund, and they also gave us enough money to buy all the family's laptops when the COVID hit, and we realised we were going to have to do a lot more online. We've also been funded by Shrewsbury Town Council. We're very grateful for them. They funded our refugee weeks, and this year, the week had to be online. So we developed a website, which you can see at the end. It's called ShropshireRefugeeWeek.org, made by Nikki Holmes. And on there is just a giant collection of music, stories and visuals, anything, poetry. The year before was very event-led, so we did lots of events. It was lovely. Hopefully next year we'll be back to doing events. And we've also been funded by the Barrow Cadbury Trust recently. That was also a COVID fund, and that was to help us for 6 months with an extra member of staff, which has been an absolute godsend. And my mission is to find the funding to keep her on for as long as we need her, because she's great. So very grateful to our funders. Now this bit's a bit wordy, so I'm going to try and rattle through it. But basically, one of the things that we do is welcome new families. Obviously, we collect things, we buy them stuff, we try and show them around. I usually pay for them to go out in the county and have a day out as a family. We run the closed Facebook group, which now has about 1,100 people in it. And within that group, I put out my requests. We share stuff about what we're doing. I have to keep it closed to keep the refugees safe. And I like to kind of know who's in there, really. So I do what I can to check that everybody in there is refugee friendly. But we facilitate offers from the public and other organisations. We respond to requests from the families. And also we've expanded what we do now to anyone who needs it. So refugees and asylum seekers in the county. We managed to get an asylum seeking family a brand new mattress the other day, just with one post. It was just so heartwarming. So we allocate volunteers, we start new projects in there, and we announce anything that we need or any new projects that we're doing within there. We get bikes for the families when they arrive, and we continue to replace them through the Shropshire Cycle Hub. Groups that we run normally are English classes. So we do those 2 days a week in our new hub in Shrewsbury. And we've now obviously had to move those online. We did weekly women's groups, monthly men's trauma and resilience classes, which became very philosophical. To be honest, it was an interesting project, and we had to pause that because of COVID this year, but we will be hopefully starting that up again next year. An organisation called Seven Futures has been doing that for us from Leicestershire. We run activity days in the school holidays for the children. We give them opportunities to increase their education and get certificates. So we paid for them to get first aid and food hygiene. Stress management courses, we facilitate, I've said about that, offers from the public. We host parties for them. So Eid parties, Christmas parties, engagement and wedding parties. So we were trying to get them, do it with them and for them until they can do it for themselves, basically. But of course, all these wonderful things have been paused now, haven't they? So we're also developing new projects. So homework clubs, homework help online. We helped with education from the beginning. It's not our primary thing that we do, but we were very lucky to have Kariman Yakul, who's on this group today. And she was already a TA who spoke Arabic, and we realized that the children were not getting any support when they first arrived in the schools, and so she very selflessly visited these children for the first year and a half for free and helped them whenever she could. And so we then negotiated with Shropshire Council and got her a full-time education post as the resettlement refugee TA, I think. I don't know her actual title. She might tell you in a minute. Sorry. So we're very proud that we developed that. And there's not many counties that have a role like that. We also co-hosted a weekly homework club at Shrewsbury School, but that's now turning online. And some of the older children were able to access homework help in our hub. And also some children that were in the right age range were able to access the Concord College summer school. So that was a real treat and a life-changing opportunity, really. To have that opportunity was wonderful. We don't take the lead in employment either, but we work very closely with Enable, who do, and we facilitate pass-on offers from organisations and companies and the public. We have assisted families to gain certificates in food hygiene, first aid, and we help them to get to their driving tests, and we get them sometimes people that will help them to practice driving, although that's a little bit specialist. You've got to have nerves of steel. Some of our support workers in the past have assisted families to start removal and van companies. We've got 4 of them now, and we have a woman who's started up her own food catering company now, so we do everything we can to support that and to ensure that they're doing everything right and help them to understand businesses in the UK. And we work closely with the Marches Business Hub for that. So we link families up. So another part of what we do is network and nurture support in the county. And that's a really important part of what we do, because I think what we realised at the very beginning was how many people wanted to get involved, who wanted to help and just didn't know how. So what I like to do is just enable people to help in whatever way they can. So we raise awareness on social media, through websites and YouTube. The main time is Refugee Week in June. We deliver talks to schools and groups and participate in interfaith days and culture days and events. We go on the radio, we've been on the TV. We're always getting in the papers for various things, which is quite nice. We're a part of the City of Sanctuary Network, which is a network of refugee and asylum seeking friendly people, businesses, schools, I mean, you name it, there's libraries, there's shops, there's all sorts of streams. And it's an area that I have not had time to really roll out properly across the county, but it's definitely happening next year. It's definitely happening. We deliver and we attend training across the country, and we liaise with other councils like Telford, Coventry, Birmingham to make sure we're in keeping with what they're doing and learning from them. And we have regular meetings with other welcome groups across the Midlands. Other aspects of our service, so it's ever changing according to need, according to what's going on in the world. And so we provide, like we said, secondhand bikes. We work with the Food Hub and we get a delivery at our venue in town. We signpost to other organisations. We gather resources, literature. We've got the hub now where people can come, hang out, come for help, come for advice. We've recently had quite a few Europeans through our door who are finding themselves homeless, and I see that getting worse in the coming months. We don't say no to anyone who needs help, and even British people, I would help anyone really. So we collect stuff. We get involved with nationwide and international schemes and collections and promotions, and we can refund travel costs to people to come and access our services. We liaise, well, I liaise a lot with other teams in the county, social services, education departments, strengthening families teams, all of those kinds of early years, that sort of thing. And so does Carrie Mann in her role as an educator. So when COVID hit, we had to really change everything to go online. So as I've said before, we managed to get all of our families' laptops. We set up some WhatsApp groups and we delivered our support on there with interpreters alongside Jackie Kearney, the county's resettlement coordinator. And we worked together as a really close team, and we contact each other every single day. And we brought on board some new interpreters. We have Nashwa now as well. And we set up a WhatsApp group with Arabic speaking doctors to reassure people if they were worried about their symptoms. We had stuff translated, documents translated, websites translated, phone processes translated so that they could enable themselves to help themselves in that hard time. We delivered food and we delivered activity parcels for the children. We gave them cash because normally I would have put on events for them in the holidays and stuff, but we didn't. So between donations and money from our activities pot, they all had about £100 each, which helped out at a very difficult time. Yeah, we developed a YouTube channel where we put on ESOL classes and mental health support. So we did everything we could to to level the playing field for them and reassure them, really. So this is the poster that we had for the Homework Club from Shrewsbury School. And here's a picture of some wonderful kids getting their bikes. And this is a picture of one of our activity days that we did in the holidays, not this year, probably last year. Kids loving to play football and rough and tumble. This is a photo of one of our classes that we ran at the very beginning. It was a stress management class. And these days we are focusing more on education, ESOL, continuing support with appointments and reading letters and things, developing independence. And my main focus next year is going to be mental health, which is a real quagmire. So at the present time, we have 20 families in Shropshire that we are officially grant funded to look after in their year 2 and 3 of the 5-year resettlement programme. Many of our families are coming up to year 5 next year. Some of our families will be in year 3 next year. And so we have about 12 families in Telford and Wrekin, I believe. We are in touch with them, but we don't have an awful lot to do with them. They know where I am if they need me, and I occasionally get requests through. We did have 23 families. 3 families moved out of the county. This happens because of a number of reasons. Sometimes they they were always going to end up in a different part of the country anyway, because they've got friends and family there. So they are just using us as a stopgap, which is fine. Someone else had family in a city, so they moved closer to them. Well, 2 families moved to be closer to families. And one family moved because of love. She met somebody. So we are due to resettle another 2 families before we've done our commitment of, I think we said we would resettle 25 families, but that's been paused because of COVID. Roughly, we have about 20 young unaccompanied asylum seekers that find themselves in our county, often trafficked in, and they will be usually getting out at service stations. I think Shifnal is a point and Battlefield is another point where people drop off or jump out. If they're under 18, they're automatically swept up by social services and they get fostered or they get put into supported living. And sometimes there's no space for them in the county, apparently. So they will be sent out of county, but still paid for and looked after by our county. So the numbers vary all the time. So I don't ever really know the full amount of who's here because I'm not that involved with them at the moment. But it's an area that I've always reached out to, and everybody in those teams knows that I'm here for those children or teenagers, young adults, whatever you want to call them. So once the UK has completed the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme, they have announced last week that they're not ready to commit to the new UK resettlement scheme, which was planned for next year. They were going to start resettling them from this year, actually, and it was going to be people from other parts of the world as well as Syria. And so they've called it the UK Global Resettlement Scheme. But our government has decided that it's not a good time to do that right now. So they haven't committed to anything, and I'm going to reserve my opinion on that right now. So I know some of you would like to know the ins and outs, and I must admit I've just done what I can to research. I may not have it perfect, but bear with me. So the official definition of a refugee are people that have fled war, violence, conflict or persecution, have crossed an international border to find safety in another country. They obviously have to leave with very little possessions, and the official line is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, member of a particular social group or political opinion. Now, all of our refugees have obviously gone through that process, but they do have to prove it. It's not good enough for them just to say it. They have to be able to evidence, a number of these factors. An asylum seeker is basically a want-to-be refugee. And so asylum seeker is somebody whose request for sanctuary has yet to be processed. Every year, apparently 1 million people seek asylum. National asylum systems are in place to determine who qualifies for international protection. However, during mass movements of refugees, usually as a result of conflict or violence, it's not always possible or necessary to conduct individual interviews with every asylum seeker who crosses the border. So these groups are often called prima facie refugees, whatever that means. I imagine that makes up the bulk of people that have been displaced. Apparently the government's reviewing its policy on asylum seekers' rights to work in the UK. At the moment, they have a system where they can't work until they've waited for over 12 months and a certain process has to have happened. They have to gone through the initial decision, then they have to go through a second process. It's really awful. So I'll let you read all of that in more detail on the recording, because otherwise you'll be here all day. At the moment, asylum seekers have the right to housing, cash support and healthcare. But somewhere along the line, something's going wrong, because there's a large percentage of homeless people that are asylum seekers, particularly in the cities. The houses that they are given are often really horrible rat infested places. There's a lot of issues finding housing for them. And in fact, our county refused to be a dispersal county for asylum seekers because they are majoritively single men. And our county said that we don't have accommodation for single men as it is, let alone bringing in, I think they wanted us to take in about 40 of them, but we didn't. So they don't get a choice of where they live, and they get £37.75 a week per person to live off, which is extraordinary, isn't it? I think they've recently put it up by something like 3p. I mean, it's really awful. Even though it says they should get, it says they may get free National Health Service. I know a lot of asylum seekers can't access health because they don't want to be, I guess, on the radar, or they've had their asylum claim refused. I think there's also problems with paperwork. It doesn't always run smoothly anyway. They get a real rough deal. So what is the current global situation? So how many refugees are there around the world? Apparently, at least 79.5 million people in the world have been forced to flee their homes. And amongst them are nearly 26 million refugees. So that just means that those are the ones that have been processed, doesn't it? Around half of whom are under the age of 18. There are also millions of stateless people who are denied nationality, employment, education, healthcare. You know, I can't imagine what this world is going to look like in 10 or 20 years' time. So 1% of the world's population have fled their homes as a result of conflict or persecution. And it's a really poignant topic for me personally, because that's nearly always governments, isn't it? Attacking innocent people. Governments bombing innocent people for some gain. It infuriates me. Here we have a diagram. It's not a very up-to-date one, I'm afraid. It was really hard to find really up-to-date figures. Nothing for 2020, some stuff for 2019, but this is actually 2015. The host countries that look after the most refugees, and actually it's very similar still. So Turkey's the top one, but then that's only because we pay them loads of money to keep them away from us. Pakistan, Lebanon. Most of our families that live here were living in Lebanon or Jordan when they declared themselves as refugees. So we've had a few families, I think, from Iraq, but they would have ended up they would have had some connection to Syria. They would have been in Syria and then had to leave Syria. The asylum seekers tend to be from the more African countries or from Vietnam. Here's a bit of a breakdown of where they're from. So Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In there now, I think Iran and Iraq are quite high up. So amongst adults, these are the asylum seekers that are in the UK. Iran was at the top nationality claiming asylum in the UK in the year ending June 2020. The top 5 countries of nationality for asylum applications are Iran, Albania, Iraq, and Eritrea. Amongst the unaccompanied asylum seeking children, the largest number are from Iranian, Vietnamese and Afghan are the other ones. So most of those, all of them would have been trafficked. Some of them would have been trafficked reluctantly, particularly the Vietnamese children. There's a very tight trafficking system that manages to get them over here and normally working in cannabis farms. Here's a very pretty diagram from the UNHCR, and there's a lot to take in there. So again, I think I'm going to let you look at that one in your own time, but it just highlights again where people are from and where they're living. Again, the countries that host most of the refugees around the world: Turkey, Pakistan, Uganda, Sudan, so all poor countries except for Turkey now. And 85% of the refugees live in the country bordering their own. So that's, when it comes to Syria, that's probably Turkey, Jordan, I don't know, I'm really bad at geography, Lebanon, that's why we get them from there. In Europe, Spain, France, Germany and Greece received the highest numbers of asylum applications, making up 74% of all the applications in Europe between them. Notice there's no UK on there. Here's another diagram of who takes on the bulk of the refugees. So Germany first, France, then Spain, then Greece, then there we are. Italy, Sweden. I think Swedish figures have changed recently. I'm sure they've got more now. I don't know, something happened, but I can't remember how old this document is. And the Greek islands are just inundated. You know, people's whole lives, whole islands have been destroyed by people who are desperate for somewhere safe to be. And they're in squalor. Those Greek islands, the camps are terrible. So how many people are there in the UK? So resettlement is a formal process and the government agrees to it. The government agreed to resettle 20,000 refugees under the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme. So they had to tick a lot of boxes to even get on that. So they had to have severe mental health issues, severe physical health issues. They couldn't ever go back to their own country for fear of persecution. They had to tick a lot of boxes to be extra vulnerable to come here, which I don't think they took that into account when they're now criticising the schemes because there's not enough people in work and standing on their own 2 feet. We've basically had quite traumatised people arrive on our shores. According to the UNHCR statistics at the end of 2019, there was 133,094 refugees, 61,968 pending asylum cases and 161 stateless people in the UK. Now, I know they're not refugees, but I do see a looming issue with Europeans who are here and are now expected to apply to remain or leave. And apparently 900,000 of those haven't done that yet. So I think the absolute deadline is July next year. But we've already seen the impact of this and Brexit and COVID. And I'm sure that if you live in Shropshire, you've noticed the group of Romanians that are now begging on the streets. I think we'll see a lot more of that. Shropshire Supports Refugees is going to try and be there for them as well. So according to the government website, the UK offered protection in the form of asylum, humanitarian protection, blah, 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 to nearly 17,000 people this year. Obviously, it's more than that now. 32,400 and something asylum applications this year. And if you want more detail, there's a link there that you can look at on the gov.uk website, which will tell you much more about it. And they like to try and make it look like we've resettled loads of people, but of course we haven't, especially compared to the rest of the world. And compared to our population, it's not enough. So COVID-19 and Brexit have made migrants of all types vulnerable to exploitation and slavery in the UK. At the moment, the number of potential modern slavery victims identified in the UK has risen by 52%. And that's only the ones that have been identified. So through the national referral mechanism, 10,600 people were referred last year. And I think that the figures just go up every year. The current figures for slavery in the UK are 100,000 victims, and that's an estimate. We can assume it's more than that. There are 2,000 live investigations going on at the moment and 7,000 crimes recorded so far this year. In the Midlands alone, we had 4,197 cases of slavery. Now, this is by no means all people that are trafficked in from the Middle East or anywhere else. Actually, the majority of slaves in the UK are British, but everything at the moment is escalating for a number of different reasons, and we are determined to be on top of it as much as we can be for this county. So it's a looming problem, and we all need to be aware of it. So we We promote and we host these wonderful training courses that are put on by West Mercia Police. And we have another one coming up on the 15th of December at 10 o'clock. So if you want to get on that, just get in touch with me or get in touch with West Mercia Police there. That document will be there for you to see. And I've also posted about this on our website. So it's so useful and educational. And it talks about how it blurs into county lines and how it's affecting our children. I highly recommend it. So what does next year hold for us? Next year is our last guaranteed granted year. So we don't know if it's going to be our last year in existence. We're going to do everything we can to keep being funded because we don't see these problems going away. And we still want to be there to help our families. So we're going to continue to focus on the changing needs of the refugees and be there and ready for what the future may bring. We're going to continue to develop the independence of our resettled refugees through education, information sharing and ESOL, that's English classes. We're going to continue to develop our knowledge base, networks and training. We're going to continue to develop a robust, holistic mental health programme and find funding to enable the refugees to access that. We're going to continue to develop a clear, effective but compassionate approach to exploitation and slavery in the county, with a caring pathway for victims with the Shropshire Safeguarding Communities Partnership. We're going to continue to raise awareness and educate the population of Shropshire through social media, talks, City of Sanctuary and Refugee Week, amongst other ways. We're going to continue to develop a youth group for next spring with the Shropshire Youth Association, which isn't going to be just for refugees. It's going to be for anybody who's wanting to join a multicultural youth group. We're going to continue to change the organisation status to charity because this is going to be needed more than ever to ensure the project can continue. And we're going to continue to channel goodwill and offers from the public and respond to requests from the families. And here are some happy photos to end on. I wish I could show you more, but what we're doing is we're having our website redone at the moment, and we're going to put tons of them up there so you can see all of the things that we've been getting up to over the years. So this is little Mohammed, and that's one of our volunteers up, I don't know what that is, in Telford Town Park with some of our kids. This was a banquet that we put on. 9 of the women fed 60 something people from Shropshire Adult Social Services, and it was just amazing, delicious. We're going to continue to host parties and help families to enjoy themselves, you know. It's time for them to have some fun, even though it's hard for them to do that, knowing how much their families and friends are suffering. We still believe that it's their right to enjoy life. So please stay in touch with us and follow us on social media, join the closed Facebook group, like the Facebook page where I tend to put more international and national other people's projects on there. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, but that's the very early days, that is. We're slowly trying to go into that area and we're having our website developed. So when we have that developed, there'll be lots of resources on there. And we've got the second website, which is specifically for Shropshire Refugee Week. And you can email us at info@shropshiresupportsrefugees.co.uk and let us know if you want to get involved in any way at all. We'll do our best to facilitate that. Okay, so that's me. Thank you. I'm going to, oh, it's done. There we are.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That was really wonderful. I'm sure we'll have some questions, but I think what we'll do now is we'll have a little 5-minute, 6-7 minute comfort break, and we'll come back here at, say, just before 1:45. You know, it's quite interesting when Amanda put up that slide of how we compared to other countries. That was the absolute number, and it wasn't per head of population. And of course, Sweden, the absolute number of refugees and asylum seekers in Sweden isn't that high, but relative to their population, it is very high.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're some of the highest in Europe: Germany, Sweden and Norway. England is one of the lowest. So the figures, say for Germany per head of population, I think per 100,000, it's something like 1,500 refugees in Germany. The average for Europe is 260, and for UK it's 60. And there are, I think, only 3 countries who have less refugees than us. And I think there are things like Slovenia and Poland, who are pretty xenophobic country anyway. And so it's nothing to be proud of, our record of taking refugees. And actually, you know, from the point of view of refugees, we're very lucky. We're a long way from Syria and there's water all around us. Whereas if you lived in Greece or Hungary or Turkey, they just walk across the border and they have a bigger problem. So I think we could probably do more than we're doing.
I did some research recently, just before I did a radio show. I don't know what I thought they were going to ask me, but I thought I'd better try and make myself as knowledgeable as possible. And I was looking at facts and figures and just Googling stuff, really. And I found out, you know, the hundreds of billions of pounds that our country spends on bombing other countries and then making sure they keep them out of our country, any of the refugees that are a result of it. The millions and trillions that they send out to other countries to keep people, the 150 million pounds one year just to put barriers up in Calais. You know, don't get me on that, honestly. Where's the logic? If you're going to export arms and sell arms and bomb people, then you need to get ready for all the refugees that are going to be a result of it as well, don't you? So,
okay. So let's just go through some of the questions that people have put up here. So Margaret Can says, what happens at the when a family reaches the end of their 5-year resettlement program? Can they continue to receive specialist support if needed?
Yes, well, this is what we're hoping to be able to offer them. So as long as we're in existence, we'll always help anybody. It's a real art getting it right. So not helping them too much that you're holding them back from being independent, but also, you know, not leaving them high and dry and stressed out because of something that's easily fixed. So we've tried our best. We've learned a lot on the way. You know, we haven't had it perfect all the time, but we've now got a really good method of helping them. And we would hope that they wouldn't need us that much, but we'd want to be there for them anyway. There's no immigration advisors in the county that I know of. So we are going to be putting our staff through training so that we can offer that kind of low-level advice, maybe level 1 and 2 OISC training. And anything higher than that would need a solicitor probably, and would probably need a specialist immigration advisory organisation. But we want to be able to help them and advise them for as long as they need it, really. So at the end of 5 years, there will be a formal process they will have to go through to either remain in the country or choose to leave. Today, we had some bad news from the UNHR and the government, who have decided to stop something called the Family Links forms, which were really only just information that our families would write about their families that were still in Syria or in the camps, to say that they wanted to bring them over. Now, it didn't mean that they could bring them over. It just meant that when their families got to the front of the queue, it was a resource to match them up, hopefully close to where their existing relatives are. But unfortunately, it's caused apparently more problems than it's solved. So they've stopped this form. Now, what that form stopped is going to mean is a total devastation of hope for these families, that they'll ever see their families again. So I don't know if that's going to have an impact on whether they choose to go back, or whether they can go back, or whether they want to go somewhere else a bit closer to their families. I mean, the thought of never seeing any of your family again in the flesh is something that none of us are hopefully going to ever have to think about. But you know, 5 years is long enough, and some of them have actually not seen their families for longer than that because they were already in camps for years before then. So who knows what they're going to choose, but what they do choose, we'll support them. And there will be probably hoops that they'll be made to jump through, knowing our government. So we'll see what happens, really. But I mean, most of them, I imagine, would stay for the sake of their children, but then that's just, a horrible choice to have to make, isn't it? So who knows, really, but we would like to be there for them.
That's very good. On the subject of children, we've got a couple of questions. Could you say a few words about the integration of children into local schools, and how do we help families integrate?
Ariman, would you like to answer this one? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute, darling. I can start. So when the kids come, there wasn't a system in place for the first couple of years. So Kariman just used to go in wherever you thought you were needed, didn't you? Yeah. And just spend a couple of hours with the kids explaining things to them or interpreting things for them. But now that role's become quite more complex, hasn't it now? And there's a lot more family support involved. Do you want to say a little bit about what's involved?
Yes, yeah. To start with, the first year we weren't allowed to get too much involved because of the refugee action. We're taking this part of work, but we started to support the children from the second year. I worked with all the families in all over the schools in Shropshire, really, and I supported them support the school. I was working as a link between the parents and the children, do interpreting in parents' meeting, and try to help the teachers how to deal with these children, to understand their traumas. It is really a very challenging job because we have to work with all the schools from secondary to primary, different levels. And the hardest part, or the hardest bit, was when children arrived when they are teenagers, age like 15 or 16. So it's really hard for them to start to learn English. It's not much facilities here in Shropshire. Some of them, they now have to go to Wolverhampton to reset their GCSEs. So it's quite challenging for the older children. But for the little one, they really getting more involved quickly. It's easy to, like a sponge. They observe more English. It's much easier for them to adapt and to get used to the system in UK, really. Some school done really brilliantly. They're very supportive, they're very understandable to these families. Some school, they just like counted them like any other children, and they need to cope, and this is a really good chance for them to survive. So it is really very interesting experience to work with different type of school in Shropshire.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. Nick and Judith ask, well, I wonder why Britain is such a magnet. Is it that we're at the end of the line of countries that reject other people?
I think if you look at the figures, you'll notice that actually we're not much of a magnet at all. That the people that come to this country, they come here because they've got family here, they've got friends here, they've got maybe some English language where they can't speak German or one of the other languages. You know, they have a good reason for coming here, and it certainly isn't the benefit system, is it? If you think about living off £37 a week, it's a harsh, hostile environment to come into, and they can often end up in detention centres, which are like prisons, and they don't have any idea of how long they're going to be there. They can be there for years. Even the young and asylum, the young children, the teenagers that get here have usually been walking for like 5 or 6 years to get here. And they're treated like criminals, really. They're treated as guilty before they are proved innocent. So the asylum seekers that end up here do not have a good time. And I think our government's going to make sure that that continues or gets worse. And so I don't think we are a magnet, to be quite honest. I think we're just taking less than our fair share of destitute people that I also feel we've probably had a hand in making destitute, to be quite honest.
Thank you. Wendy asks about driving. Do any of them take driving lessons or have any support for that? Or is it cars are not a...
No, they've nearly all got cars now. They can't always keep cars on the road because of finances. They already drove before they came here, and so they could drive on their international licenses for the first year, but then that runs out. So then after that, they have to retake their tests. And in the first year, they were able to do that in Arabic, and they went over to Ireland and we would pay money towards them getting there. And now they have to do it in English, so that makes it harder. And also, you know, the actual practical test itself is quite stressful. So if you're already traumatized, your mind doesn't work brilliantly for you at the best of times, let alone under stress. And so there's a lot of people fail numerous times. But we've got women now that are passing as well, which is great because you don't see that in Syria so much. But it's so important for them to be independent in so many ways, you know, not least because they can't get hold of proper Arabic food in Shropshire. There's a lot of reasons why we need cars. I mean, there's a reason why nearly all of us here have got cars, isn't there? So I don't begrudge them for 1 minute. But yeah, most of them that want to drive are driving now. And some of them have got van businesses as well. So it's great.
Any other questions? Do people speak out if you want?
I would like to ask, if I may, what sort of connection you have with legal advisors should refugees, asylum seekers need someone to appeal legally on their behalf?
Yes, well, like I said, there's not a lot in this county, I'm afraid. So that's why I'm filling in the gaps myself. So we'll probably go and get trained, but it won't be high level stuff. At the moment, they have to go to Staffordshire or Cheshire or Wolverhampton for their nearest immigration advisors. We've got very strong links with the Refugee and Migrant Centre in Wolverhampton. Somebody who's quite high up in their organisation is going to be one of our trustees, and she feeds us information and helps us out regularly. We have access to some of their advisors. There's a couple of CABs around the Midlands that do it, but only level 1 or 2, I think. So there's a real shortage of that kind of thing here in this county, to be honest.
I must admit, I had to use my passport to get here because I'm in Staffordshire.
Oh, right.
But yes, which is really why I asked the question, because we're very lucky in Stoke that we do have regular access to legal advice.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And so that you're probably one of the closest places for our refugees to go. I know in the early days when they first got here, they were very, very preoccupied with trying to bring their family over, which you would be, wouldn't you? And so they went there to Stafford. Some of them went there for advice. And obviously didn't get the answer they wanted, and also travel visas and things like that. So yeah, we're lacking in Shropshire.
Any other questions?
Simon,
Well,
I can't work out how to send my question.
You just say it. Speak up, Phil.
This to everyone. No.
Just say it. Say your
The
question.
question is, have you had any public opposition or criticism about what you're doing?
Well, I personally have only ever had 2 critics on social media, and that was both on the open page. I purposely don't look at general media because you just get people trolling who are just mean and don't even know what they're talking about most of the time. So the first person complained that British families don't get this kind of help, and I could see that that was obviously a cry for help. So I just said, look, we help anyone that needs it. Is there something we can do to help you? And she just went, oh, right, I see, sorry. And the other person was just some manic political weirdo who decided that we were helping terrorists. So I blocked him from all my groups. I haven't got time to waste on people that are just mean-spirited. So, you know, I know there's always going to be people that object to having refugees here, but I think they're very, they've got short-term memories, because if they think back just a couple of generations, they'll probably find refugees in their family at some point. At the end of the day, we're an island, and we've been populated through the generations in lots of different ways. So it's usually people that are fearful. So I feel sorry for them.
Thank you.
I couldn't ask. I'm glad you couldn't send your question either, Phil. I couldn't send mine. I wanted to just say, you know, that all this might be coming to an end this year, and was there anything that we could do to, you know, help ensure that you can carry on such good work? I mean, I've written several times to our MP. I'm particularly concerned about unaccompanied young people who've got family over here. You get a load of statistics which really don't give the picture and not very much else. So I'm not inclined to go down that route, but is there anything else that's helpful?
Yes, unfortunately, Daniel is not a fan.
No.
I've had debates with him and he gets extremely cagey and defensive and then goes on about how much money we spend to basically keep them out of our country. So yeah, that's a dead end. But, you know, I'm always looking for funding opportunities. If you see anything that, you know, many eyes might help, appropriate funding pots that we can apply for, that's the sort of thing I think we're going to have to rely on. And we will always look out for government tenders. But, you know, we do need to, we've spent this year getting ourselves in a government tending position. So we're watertight, and we'll be looking out for opportunities to get involved with anything to do with refugees, asylum seekers, exploitation, anti-slavery stuff, working with young unaccompanied asylum seekers, and also, like I said before, Europeans that find themselves here illegally and vulnerable to exploitation after July. So thank you for that.
Amanda, a question really in two parts. First of all, could you say a little bit about introducing and how you're introducing people into work? We've spoken about children, but getting presumably predominantly men into skills or whatever they may be to work. And also, how are you dealing with women where I would think it's more difficult to get them, because of language and culture, more integrated into, particularly into Shropshire, into local society?
Yeah, sure. So we don't take the lead on employment, but the council paid for an organisation called Enable to dedicate a worker who has worked very hard, and she's got a lot of them into work experience and jobs. And we had a interpreter who helped a number of them get into their own businesses because he had his own van business, so it was easier for him to help them to emulate that. So we've got at least 4 people that have got their own businesses at the moment, and a lady who wants to cook professionally. So we help her where we can. I think one thing that this government...
On that point, how would we be able to identify in terms of contacting their businesses? I mean,
Yeah, well, we promote them if they want us to. We promote them in our Facebook group. So there's one particular guy who regularly posts about his removals company. You know, we don't force our help on people, but if they ask us for help, then we'll raise awareness for them. What I think in general has been underestimated is the level of trauma that these people have been through, the level of damage that's been done to their ability to learn, their ability to be well, their ability to have healthy mental health. A lot of them don't sleep at night. They have flashbacks. They have all sorts of somatic, traumatic, physical ailments. They are definitely not the healthiest of refugees because they have to have met those boxes, tick those boxes for vulnerability to even get on the scheme. So what wasn't put in place was a robust mental health program for these guys. And actually the cultural barriers to mental health has been extraordinary, and we have tried to get over them, but we're still trying to find the answer, because if your mind isn't sleeping, if you're not well, how can you get up and go to work in the morning and hold down a job, learn a new language, cope with a family of young children? You've lost your identity. You don't know who you are anymore. In Syria, you were the house, you know, the head of the house, the man that brought the money in. Everybody had their roles. The women have normally got a lot of children, a lot of little children, which has prevented some of them from accessing English classes in the first couple of years. We have integrated them as much as we can in the way of bringing volunteers together, English people, meeting with them in women's groups and other opportunities. And they obviously have neighbours. A lot of them have very friendly neighbours that are very helpful. We allocate volunteers to them so they learn English and they can be shown around the county. And, you know, you just hope that they will find their own feet. We can't do everything for them.
Yeah.
But it's step by step. There's a lot of change. I went to an amazing talk run by the IOM about culture shock. And on another talk, I'll go into it some more about the actual peaks and troughs of having culture shock. It's not just like, oh, isn't this different? It's like a massive trauma where you have peaks of success and depression and disappointments and excitement and, you know, a constant journey for years of just trying to adjust to something as different as our culture is to theirs. You know, you can't get any more far removed, really.
But it normally takes a generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Kids have adapted really quickly. You know, they're already fluent and happy and adapted. But, you know, the ones that can be in work are in work. The ones that aren't in work for a very good reason. And we knew that we were taking these people on with these issues. So now the government are complaining that, you know, there's not enough of them in work. What do you expect when you've just brought over people that have had to witness their entire families murdered in front of them or been tortured for a year? You know, you can't just suddenly drop them in a different country and expect them to just crack on with it. So I think that a lot has been learnt in the last 5 years, but it's all a bit late, really. So
Sorry, I'm rather hogging it here a bit, but do you think if things in Syria eventually settle down, I mean, what is your view that many would then try to return and re-establish, or would their children by then be so entrenched here it'd be difficult for them to do so?
Well, it's just going to be another heart-wrenching time, isn't it? You know, all of them say they'd like to go back to Syria, all of them. Maybe just one family that I know that doesn't. But, you know, where is your home? Your home is where your heart is, isn't it? Your home is where your family are. Your home is where your relatives and your ancestors and your friends, you know, that's where your home is. So they don't, you know, of course they want to be reunited with everybody. And if it was possible for them to just fly around and see their family whenever they wanted to, maybe they'd consider, would certainly make their life easier, wouldn't it? You know, but I don't think any one of us can imagine what it's like to not be allowed to get on an airplane and just go where we want to, or drive somewhere, or see whoever we want to at any time. So I think that they probably will at the first opportunity, but people have already started to go back, and there are horror stories coming out that, you know, they're just getting retribution and they're getting taken off by the police and tortured, and it's not safe.
No. Thank you.
It's okay.
Is there any psychiatric support for children who've come here as little children, having escaped from really traumatic situations, and then they arrive here and they don't know anybody and they don't know how to live in England and so on and so forth? So that just compounds their disturbance?
The answer is no.
I was afraid it might be.
Yeah, no, there isn't. And there wasn't really any attempt to try, to be honest, by the formal organisations in the county. I did have meetings with all the teams originally, and there's a big cultural resistance to anybody helping. They see it as a threat. There's, you know, rumours that you get your kids taken off you at the slightest thing. You know, they are resistant to having help and advice. And we've had organisations approach me to say we'll offer them therapy, and you know, they've never really come off the ground because of one reason or another, funding or lack of interest, but you know, the kids are resilient. The kids I have the least amount of concerns for, really, are the young ones. I think it's worse for the older ones who've got many more traumatic memories, and they find it much more difficult to integrate and learn the language, and have to, like Kariman said, jump into the deep end and learn GCSE level English. You know, they're exposed to bullying at school and intolerance. This is why I'm hoping this youth group will attract most of them, and we can do work on self-esteem and building resilience and mentoring and finding your voice, and you know, you can interweave all sorts of things into youth groups, can't you?
Yeah. Can I just add a little thing about this? That the hardest bit will be the language barrier as well, because a lot of English people, they can have counselling, but the language, it's a really big barrier. Until you be able to communicate in that language, you need 2 to 3 years to build up your language. So the language stops a lot of these children as well to get any help or any service from schools, like counselling or specialist, or, you know, somebody, you know, to help them to talk. Like a lot of the TAs now being trained to talk about, you know, mental health and resilience and well-being, but the children, they will, the first year, they will not be able to communicate that high level of English, really. So that was a lot of barrier, really.
Yeah, that's why we tried to do it through arts and crafts, fun and games, and you know, those sorts of things are therapeutic in their own right, aren't they? And actually, I don't mind saying it today, I have just bought into a very exciting scheme, because we're not having much headway with mental health for adults or children. I saw this as a possible way of helping people that's very minimal language involvement and cutting edge. So I've just bought into a virtual reality therapeutic program, which you put the headset on and there's all these different programs for different issues, and we'll be able to roll that out with children and adults alike, alongside a whole bunch of other ideas that I've got. I'm in regular contact with people like IAPT who struggle to get our men and women on board with their therapeutic offerings. If they get through to them at the top, it doesn't often work out very well. You know, there's a myriad of issues that support their trauma not being resolved. So I'm busy working behind the scenes to develop my new mental health project, which I'll tell you all about as it develops and as it grows.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? Well, I am exhausted from your energy. You have a boundless energy, and it's extraordinary what one person can achieve. And you've drawn everybody in to you by leading from the front and being so enthusiastic. I think the refugees and asylum seekers in Shropshire are very lucky that you have taken on their cause. Very lucky indeed. And we are, well, I think Shropshire should be proud of you, and I really mean that. In fact, I think we might have a whip round and see if we can't put some money towards the work you're doing.
Oh, bless
you. It is very
Thank
impressive,
you.
and
Thank
we'd
you.
like to hear more about this and more updates. And you know, yeah, let's keep in contact. And thank you very much indeed for a really fascinating and inspiring talk. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I just have to finish by saying there's no way I could have done this on my own. It's been an absolutely massive joint effort. We've worked with over 150 volunteers, and I've had people like Carrie-Man next to me from day one. And we've been a real tight team, haven't we? And Jackie and Nashwa, and you know, it's definitely not just me.